What is going on, YouTube people? The Cards and Comics here. Today, we got a juicy one. Got a fun one. Michael Rubin, CEO, head honch, lord of Fanatics, was a guest on the Bill Simmons podcast today. First off, I'd recommend listening to this entire segment. It's about the last 45 minutes to an hour of his podcast. They get into cards about the last 30 minutes. The last 20 to 30 minutes are cards, and then like the last 10 minutes are about gambling. And he touched on a couple big things. First, and this is not necessarily in order, but we'll just start with the big one right off the get. He talked about, he didn't say the word loaded boxes, but he basically addressed loaded boxes. And they have been doing something this year that they never broadcasted that we were not aware of. I'll play the clip. It's about 1.5 minutes long, and we'll talk more about it after. Let me go ahead and play the clip, and you guys and girls can hear it all, and then we'll kind of discuss. And then there's a handful of other topics that he discussed that are worth talking about as well. So let's listen to this clip. This is from the 1:45-ish mark, hour and 45-minute mark of the Bill Simmons podcast with Michael Rubin that came out today.
Yeah, one of the things now, and it's not with you guys necessarily, but just like these box breaks, it's a whole thing now about did they fake that one? Oh, how did that person end up with the card in this box? And
here's what I'm going to tell you.
So how do you fix that?
So let me give you a great example.
Feel good about it.
So first of all, breaking is a big part of the collectibles industry. If a collector doesn't,
and a big part of Fanatics Live.
Correct. And if a collector doesn't like that, then they're just not being realistic, because you say there are 3 distribution points for primary cards, right? Breakers, hobby shops, and retailers like a Walmart or a Target. That's been, and before it was hobby shops and the retailers, it wasn't the breakers. The breakers now have a important and by the way, it's great marketing. So for us, we understand the math of it. You take a big breaker, and if one guy's doing 15% of the business, they're going to get 15% of the cards. So what we did, people always question the integrity of what we do. So this year, for the first time, we said, hey, let's take our auditor. I think we hired Deloitte & Touche, and it wasn't Deloitte & Touche. One of the auditors, we're going to hire you. I think it is Deloitte & Touche. We're going to hire you. We're going to pay you to audit all the results, the same way the NBA audits their draft lottery.
Oh, that's cool.
And we did that this year. Okay. Now we haven't really broadcasted, but we started doing that this past year. We now have Deloitte & Touche coming in, auditing everything to make sure that everything is random as it's advertised. So that was a great thing for us to do. We just added a cost for the authenticity of the hobby. Does everyone know we did that? No. Did we make a big deal out of it? No. But is it important to do things like that? Absolutely. I always say, anytime someone has a gripe, we should listen to it, figure out whether they're right or wrong. If they're right, we should act on it. If they're wrong, we should still hear their perspective.
So, what do we think? They have a third-party auditor auditing everything. Now, a couple things. We don't know the details of this. Are they just auditing, and the devil will be in the details on this, but the fact that they even had this, there's no way you can't say that it's at least something positive. I am sure people will nitpick this apart, but once again, there's only so much we know here. Was the auditor auditing just the random distribution of cards in the packs, where the packs were going, where the boxes are going? Those are the certain things that we don't really know per se. We just know that an auditor came in and performed some sort of audit on the back end in regards to how cards go places. We don't know the places exactly, but it is interesting that they are doing something. Now, once again, we don't know exactly what that something is, but the idea that they are at least doing some sort of audit is nice to know. Now, it would be fantastic to know exactly what they were auditing. Maybe someone will come out and say exactly what they're doing. I doubt it. Fanatics just does not seem very forthcoming with information on stuff like this. you would feel like this would be something they'd want to get out there and advertise. I don't know. Now that it's out into the ether, maybe we get more information on exactly what they are looking at. I think that will be the true key, the devil in those details on what they are exactly auditing. Is it just that all the cards are truly randomly dispersed in the packs? That then those packs are randomly dispersed across the different SKUs that they belong in? And then are those packs, once they're boxed up, randomly distributed from the distribution from Fanatics or from wherever they're coming from to the individual retail outlets, whether it's the breaker, the hobby shop, or the Target/Walmart? We don't know what step in that chain that they are auditing, but at least one of them is getting looked at, if not the whole thing. So I find that very, very interesting. I think it would be in their best interest if they are doing the entire thing to come out and say that, because if they can point to that and have a legitimate auditor step up and say, hey, we're signing off that we are checking off on this stuff, or however that works, I think that would help a lot of people. It would be a good marketing message for them, because let's be honest, the overall narrative, whether it's true or not, and we don't know that it's true or not, you can work out the math, the eye test, whatever the case might be, the narrative is that loaded boxes exist and they are out there. And to be frank, sometimes the evidence is very, very compelling. Once again, this is strictly on the top side of things, not Panini. I know there was the whole Crown Royal thing. That's a Panini product with the serial number. Not saying that Topps doesn't load boxes too and they go out, but the Panini thing was way more blatant because of the serial number on the sticker. Some other things they discussed. There's one more clip I want to play, but we'll kind of save it towards the end, and it's about distribution, because I am curious, if you own a card shop or you're a breaker and you're getting distribution direct from Fanatics, I would love feedback on this one. We'll save that one to the very end. A couple other things that he talked about. I'm not going to play clips for all these. I'm just going to kind of run these down. Once again, go listen to this full interview. It is really, really good. Talks about redemptions. Threw out some interesting things in regards to redemptions. And my big takeaway from this whole conversation was the power that specifically Rubin and Fanatics have that no other manufacturer does. Topps prior to the purchase, Panini currently, Upper Deck, whatever. He was talking about redemptions and how he learned about the redemption process. And he threw a stat out there about Topps Chrome. Prior to them taking over, Topps Chrome had 30,000 redemption cards in it. On the most current release, there was less than 1,000. And the interesting part is how he fixed that was basically leveraged his relationships. He said he found out about these and basically called Tony Clark, the president of the MLBPA, and said, hey, I have this issue. How do we fix this? And they essentially figured it out. The other thing that kind of shows the flex of Rubin/Fanatics' might is they talk about the MLB debut patches and how this Mike Mahan came up with this idea and his team in December of this past year, just 11 months ago, 12 months ago, and basically said, hey, I got this great idea, we want to do it. And they ran it by Topps, and Topps is like, there's no way in hell we could pull this off. And Rubin called Tony Clark again, the MLBPA president, and said, hey, I want to do this. And then Clark signed off on it. And then he called Rob Manfred, the commissioner of MLB, and said, hey, I want to do this. We're doing this. Are you cool? And they're basically like, sure, if you want to do it, great, go for it. And I'm sure it was more complex than that, but then it was basically done. Because the one thing that Fanatics has that none of the other companies do is, I don't want to call it leverage, but they have and Rubin specifically is in a very unique place in regards to relationships with all these different entities. And Simmons and Rubin actually talk about it earlier in this podcast when they're not talking about cards, about how he is friendly with the players and their unions and the people that represent them. He is friendly with those people. He is also friendly with the owners and the management side. he essentially has no enemies when it comes to that. He is friends with both sides of those and has worked on both sides of that table. He was a part owner, so he understands that stuff. He also understands how important the athlete and athlete relationship is. And he has these connections that he can leverage that no one else in the collectible space has ever had. And that's the stuff that excites me, because that's how we get the MLB debut patches. That's how we get cool stuff like that. And don't get me wrong, they do tons of stuff wrong too. And he did kind of talk about, he didn't address anything specifically, but he legitimately said, hey, we have effed things up too. Like, we're dealing with new companies, mistakes have happened. We've tried to react to those as quickly as possible. You can imagine the duplicate one of one thing. He did not address any of those things specifically. I just thought the takeaway of just his ability to just directly reach out to the heads of these entities and just be like, I'm going to call up Rob Manfred today and we're just going to knock this out. Most people, most executives in this industry, in the sports industry, period, don't have direct line access to those people on that level. It just does not exist. And he has that ability. He can pick up the phone and call the athlete and say, hey, you're behind on your redemptions, or hey, we need your signatures in by this date. He can reach out to Joel Embiid and say, hey, buddy, I see you're at the white party. FYI, don't forget your deadline's next week to get your SIGs in on your stuff, or whatever the case might be. And then he can also call up the owner of a team or the commissioner of a league or the president of a labor union and say, hey, we need to work together on this. It benefits all of us. And that's the other advantage of having the players having an equity stake in all this. It's to their best interest as well, because they're getting a cut of everything. He also talked about the success of MVP buybacks. And I kind of wanted to do a whole separate video on MVP buybacks, but he threw out a number that said tens of millions of dollars are redeemed in MVP buybacks, which is just a wild number. And it makes sense when you go like across the entire industry. I could see it getting that large, but that's a check that they are basically cutting. It's all a marketing expense, basically. And then people are then essentially using that money to rebuy product. Now, they don't have to use it to rebuy Topps product. You're just getting store credit for the hobby shop. You were not mandated to rebuy Topps product with that store credit, but I'm guessing a large chunk of that gets spent back on Topps product. So they're kind of just giving a little bit of a discount on Topps product off the shelf from the hobby shops. But it is great, great marketing. And he said the hobby shops and owners love it, which of course they do. You get all that extra business in, and they're getting reimbursed from Topps/Fanatics directly on that stuff. The other big thing that he discussed, and I thought this one was really interesting, high-end cards, something they are looking at doing. And he specifically mentioned like the one-of-one debut patches. So this will be on extremely high-end things. For authentication purposes, and I'm sure the Tinfoil Hat Brigade will have a field day with this one, because you could see, they didn't get into the devil will be in the details on this one as well, but you could see how, if you wanted to get a little conspiracy theory on this one, you could get there real quick. They want to put some sort of chip or something inside the card so you would be able to identify it as authentic, which I think is a fantastic idea. That is absolutely amazing. But the questions will be asked, I am sure. What else can that chip do? Can you geo-track it? Do you know exactly where that card sits with that chip in there? Also, you could go down the rabbit hole on so much stuff on that one, and I'll let the comment section and other people that make content have the field with that one. That is ripe for the plucking. But I like the concept of, hey, we have the ability to put this extra layer of authentication in there. And then like, hey, that Jordan Walker 101 debut patch, that is 100% legit. And maybe you tie it back to what the card looks like. Because, we've had in the past these patch swaps on LeBron Exquisite RPAs. So imagine back in the day, if Upper Deck obviously the technology wasn't available then, but if you could, you had a chip embedded in that card that the grading company, the end user, any person could hold a device next to it. It pops up and says, hey, this is card number 36 of 99 LeBron RPA, and it shows exactly what the card looks like. Here's what the auto looked like. It verifies that that is actually the real card because the chip's still inside, but also shows you the patch, the whole 9 yards. So you know if the patch got swapped. You would know, oh, did someone pull a Juan Soto and erase a little bit off the end of the autograph? And I don't know that that's where it's going to go. He didn't get that deep with it, but obviously there's going to be a way that if there's something in that card, there's going to be a way for a collector to identify that. I would assume it would be something in the app. Like, you know, you look up a cert number in the PSA app. Hey, hold the phone next to it, scan a QR code or something, or hold it next to it and it reads a chip that's inside of it, whatever the case might be. But if that ties back to an image, that could really cut down on patch swapping on high-end product and autograph altering on high-end product. He also addressed QA concerns, didn't get too much into it, basically just talked about they are constantly working on QA. That's part of the reason why they bought the printer, so they can get that stuff better in line and have more control over it. And then the last thing he talked about, and this is the clip that I wanted to play, was specifically about distribution. And it's just kind of interesting. This is the one I would love feedback on from shop owners or breakers, whether it's you want to publicly say something, and if you don't, I completely understand. You could feel free to DM me anonymously on my Discord, on Twitter, on IG, whatever the case might be. But let me go ahead and pull up this clip really quick.
Yeah, I mean, for me, we're just focused on doing what's in the best interest of the collector. So for us, like, let me tell you what we saw, okay, when we looked at the business. We saw a business where you had sports properties and players given the rights to Topps, Panini, Upper Deck. These companies were all selling cards to distributors who then picked where the cards go, and they weren't selling the hobby shops. They weren't serving the breakers. They weren't serving the retailers directly. It made no sense. Like, would Nike ever sell to a distributor to sell to Foot Locker or to sell to
Well, they were
Foot Action?
middlemen who used to like just mark it up.
Right. And so they were taking money away from the collector and the hobby shop. So the first thing we saw that we said, this makes no sense. We need to collapse that and service the hobby shops directly, the breakers directly, the retailers directly. I think when we bought Topps, they served 300 hobby shops. I think today we service 800 hobby shops or something like that.
So they're all happy that you did this.
Elated. They can't, they want to get product directly from us because they need that direct relationship so they can get the allocation of what they need to build their business to best support their collectors. And we rather give them the margin. You know, if you say there was a big incremental margin to split, most of that margin went to the hobby shops, the breakers, to the collectors, you know, to the industry. It didn't sit with us. We kind of passed it on. So that was very obvious.
Well, the players were getting kind of shortchanged too.
And now they're making a lot more money because we're paying them on a much higher sales.
So the part that I would love the feedback from LCSs and breakers, et cetera, that are buying direct from Topps that used to get it from distribution. Are your margins better? I've heard some things, like just in random conversations with people, that the margins are not any better, or they're basically the same, essentially. You know, the amount that the distributor was charging, Topps is just now charging that. So they're getting all the extra profit. They're not leaving any extra wiggle room for the LCSs and the breakers. Now, I could be wrong on that. No one's going to cry a river over a breaker making a bunch of profit, maybe an LCS. But I'd be curious, do you see larger profit margins purchasing directly from Topps than you did purchasing from your distributor? And it may vary on a case-by-case basis. I know there's a general Fanatics distribution program that a bulk of people are in, and then a select few are in the breaker program. There's essentially two different distributions that have kind of, I don't know if they have different pricing or not, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did. Maybe they don't. It would be interesting to hear some feedback from some store owners. Now, I doubt anyone would want to actively speak out because they would worry about it. If you want to slide into the DMs and stay off the record, I'm just curious for my own personal knowledge on, is that an accurate statement? Are the profits now rolling in better than what they were under the old model? I do think it's easier for shops to get into Topps distribution than it was before. That was always a very tricky situation. I think they have opened the books a little bit, for lack of a better term, on that. And I think it is a little easier access to get some product, but my gut tells me is that Topps/Fanatics is keeping a bulk of that extra profit margin. I could be wrong, but I don't have that information handy. So, like I said, very, very good chat between those two. I'd highly recommend listening to the entire thing. There's some insightful stuff in there. And as I've said with most things with Fanatics, they are going to do some things that piss us off, that we don't like. There's been plenty of things already, and they are going to do some things that we like. You know, we don't like the mistakes that they made. We don't like the overprinting. We don't like the increased costs. We do like the cool innovation with the 101 debut patch. We do like the MVP buyback program. We do like less redemptions. So it's going to be hit or miss with this. It's going to be like this for a while. It's probably always going to be like this. For every 2 things they do that we hate, there's going to be something they do that we like, or hopefully vice versa. That's all I got for you, boys and girls. Very curious for your feedback on this one. Catch you on the next one. Peace.